Grant, what would you like to say to Robert Jenrick? Are you convinced by this as a man to turn things around?
Not really. I'm not convinced with anything that the Conservatives are doing at the moment. It's quite depressing. A couple of weeks ago, the PM was here. I asked him about the transportation of boats from Calais to Dover. I said, what about putting the Navy in the Channel? He said, can't do that for loads of reasons. We can't do it. Today we learn that the French Navy are escorting the boats into our waters, and border fasts are picking them up and taking them to Dover. So what's the Prime Minister saying? Is he taking the mickey out of us? Because is he lying to us? Because if the French can do it and are doing it, but he's saying the English cannot do it, what's the situation and what would you do?
Yeah, well, I share your anger and frustration
at the present situation. Cab, Robert. They're all talking
you are speaking for the vast majority of the British public. The French could do a lot more. The French could intercept the boats in shallow waters, turn them back and take those people back to France. The Belgians are doing that, and that means that almost no boats leave from Belgium. There are even beaches where half the beach is in Belgium, half is in France. The boats deliberately leave from the French half of the beach because they know the Belgians would do it differently.
And we're giving the French money, though.
Yeah,
I think millions of pounds.
I think the French could do a lot more, and I'm as frustrated as you are by what's happening.
Would you put the boats in?
Well, we have tried to use the military, and that didn't have the effect that we wanted to. That happened under Boris Johnson.
It wasn't exactly.
But I think we could do more. No, you're right. We could do more on that. I actually don't think
so why are we not doing more, Robert? I mean, you've been in power, not having to go at you personally, mate, but the Tories have been in power for 14 years, 80-seat majority, and it's only now, with an election looming, you seem to come out with all the right answers. You're saying, and we understand. No one's been listening to the working class like myself. You know, I get people in the cab all the time. And apart from what's on the telly tonight, the next subject they hit me with is immigration.
Yeah,
it really is that important.
I resigned from cabinet. I gave up my ministerial job because
you could speak to Rishi?
I do speak to him. I try and persuade him. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I like and respect the Prime Minister. But the point you're making is absolutely right. We need to do more. The version of the Rwanda policy that I propose would have meant that any one of those people, as soon as they've stepped foot on British soil, would have been detained, removed within hours to Rwanda. That is a way to stop this, ultimately. We shouldn't actually be relying on the French. You don't rely on the kindness of strangers to protect your own borders. We need to do this ourselves, and that means having a much more robust policy.
OK, but Rishi's saying it's going to cost £500 million. How can this government, who are populous at the moment, put aside £500 million to send a few, flights to Rwanda, and only a minuscule amount of asylum seekers are going to go? It's not enough. It's too small. It's too weak. It's no good.
Yeah, no, I totally share. I think it's a disgrace that we've not done more.
It is a disgrace.
Every day there are hundreds of people crossing the Channel. Those people are going to cost you and other British taxpayers millions of pounds. And we know that there are crimes being committed by people who come illegally. We know that there are terrorists who've entered the UK. You've got to take the most robust approach. In fairness, on the cost issue, it is worth spending money on this issue because you can't put a price on border security. You want to ensure this country has the most robust procedures. And if that policy succeeds, and I believe it can do if done properly, then it will break the business model of the people smugglers and it will save the public money in the future.
But in all reality, is it not this government want cheap labour coming across the pond? Is it what they want?
Well, that's a question of legal migration. And I think you're right. It's not this government. It's every government in my lifetime has gone for an economic model which is reliant on cheap foreign labour. And that's had the effect of undercutting British workers' wages. It discourages businesses from investing in skills, productivity, technology. It's made it harder to get on the housing ladder, particularly in places like London where it's so expensive. I think that model is broken and we need to do something totally different.
We need to fix it.
And that is why I'm making this argument that we should be reducing migration.
We know the problem.
Down
to
the tens of thousands.
Trevor Kavanagh, you've seen more than your fair share of politicians come and go, and the immigration story really rise in this country in the last 30 years. What do you make of the current situation?
Well, I think that we know the root of this was the Blair government, but when the Conservative Party came in coalition, David Cameron promised that he would reduce immigration to the tens of thousands. It was at that time 250,000, 250,000. It was last year, while you were still Immigration Minister, 1.2 million gross, admittedly, but you're not in control of departures, you're only in control of admissions, and you allowed 1.2 million in. Now, we know that the problems of illegal immigration coming across the Channel is hugely annoying. But what really frustrates our readers and our viewers is the fact that 1.2 million people are coming and taking their jobs. And we've got 9 million people in some form of unemployment at the moment in this country. How do you justify that?
Well, I don't think you can. I think that it's a mistake. It is bad for the economy. There's been a view for a very long time that legal migration is an unalloyed good, that it makes us richer. The evidence suggests the opposite.
That hasn't been the case as far as our viewers and readers are concerned.
Well,
the people who are actually on the receiving end
yeah.
of the cheap labour that's putting them out of work or effectively affecting their wages, for sure.
Yeah, and last year, only 15% of those people who came in to the UK legally even came in for work purposes. And of that 15%, far too many were coming to do low-skilled work, which is low wage, undercuts British workers' wages. So
it doesn't really matter what they're doing. It's the numbers that are coming, and they mostly stay, and the fact that we are doing nothing whatsoever to accommodate them or provide the social and welfare services, the NHS, the education, etc., that they require in their very vast numbers, the equivalent of various numbers of cities being accommodated via Britain, without the housing for it. And you're a housing minister.
Well, I completely agree. I mean, two of the issues I've campaigned on in my time in Parliament have been building more houses and now reducing the level of migration. We'd have to be building a new home every 5 minutes, day and night, just to keep up with the number of people coming into our country.
Sure, but the fact is that you've been in office for nearly 15 years.
Well, if you look at my own personal record, I negotiated with the Prime Minister. In fact, it only happened because I threatened to resign. The largest intervention on legal migration that we've ever had. It will reduce the number of people coming into this country by 300,000 a year. But I view that as a first step. We've got to do more.
Robert, don't you feel...
The good news is, as a result of leaving the EU, we could now make changes tomorrow that would bring it down to a much lower level.
But you're not, right? And what I'm saying is, when I interviewed Boris Johnson, when we were doing the Sun was doing the EU referendum, he promised an Australian-style point system, right? People that, if we vote for Brexit, as they keep saying, we control our own borders, we'll have a say who comes in, we're going to do a point system. So people bought into that, right? Now, we've got nothing like it, and it's getting worse. So I know what you're saying that you've done. You've tried to stem the tide, but from a Conservative party that's been in, like you said, Trevor, 14 years. They've done nothing. It's
Robert,
worse.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of our time, but from everything you've said to us today and to me, you can't possibly conclude that the last 14 years of Tory government has been a success on these matters, can you? You can't. You've got to admit that it's been a failure.
I think on immigration, we have failed to deliver on the promise that we made to the British public. We do have time in the remaining months, and I appreciate that people will doubt our credibility and sincerity, but we have time. We have time to make further changes.
But will the Prime Minister do it?
Well, I hope so. Next week, I'm going to be publishing a report which hands the Prime Minister and the government some of the answers to this question. And in the remaining months before the general election, we could do that, which would go some way, I think, to saying to the public, we genuinely care about this issue.
If he doesn't do it, how can you, in good conscience, continue to support him?
Well, I hope he will do it. And obviously, members of the public also have to see what the alternative is. And in our system, the alternative to a Conservative government, and there are obviously Conservatives who care passionately about this issue, I think I'm one of them, the alternative would be a Labour government, which I think would be a disaster on this issue. You've got Keir Starmer, who campaigned for the leadership of the Labour Party for free movement, who would go into a European migration pact with the EU.
I mean, if the Tories lose the next election, surely you accept that they are the ones to blame for that then?
Well, I think we have to share some responsibility, obviously, because we've been in power. But we have done the great reform, which is leaving the European Union, giving us control of the levers. Let's use them now to control migration.
Robert Jenrick, thank you for joining us. Come back soon when you are ready to give Rishi Sunak another